Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. Perhaps it's been a bit of a stressful year, and maybe you haven't had a chance to get as much body work as you typically do. Maybe you've had the experience of sleeping wrong and waking up with some neck pain, or you know that you carry your head in that forward head posture that's sort of common these days. If any of that's true for you, or if you just care about blood flow to your brain and the proper functioning of your autonomic nervous system, you are going to want to tune into today's conversation. My guest today is someone who I believe that I was meant to meet. I'm not a huge believer in fate, but if I were, I would say that this was supposed to happen. But in any case, let me take you back to the summer of 2003. I was finishing up Chinese medical school in Albuquerque, and I was up in Corvallis, Oregon, where I now live, looking for a house, looking for a place to live. And my back was killing me. I was working as a massage therapist, going to school full time. I just gotten off a plane and I was messed up and just realized that I was going to need some help sooner rather than later. So I get out the phone book and start calling practitioners out of the yellow pages, right? The actual book, not the online version, trying to find someone who might be available to help me. And it was maybe like the fifth call. Kier picked up the phone and managed to get me in that day or the next day or something. It was kind of a miracle. And while I was on the table, we got to chatting. And it turned out that Kier had a background in shiatsu, which is the form of massage rooted in Chinese medicine, and was intensely interested in myofascial work. Meanwhile, I'd been practicing a bit of myofascial work in my bodywork practice and was living and breathing Chinese medicine, finishing my master's, taking boards and all that. So we had this super fun geek out fest. And when I arrived in Corvallis for real, we started swapping treatments and over the years became friends and office mates. And we would often have these paradigm blending conversations about fascia and meridian pathways and the body-mind connection, which were fascinating to both of us and which pretty much always shifted my understanding of the body. When Kier moved away from Corvallis, we saw each other less, as it happens when you're no longer living in proximity. But I have been following their path because Kier is one of those people with a kinesthetic sense in a personal way of what's going on in the body that they blend with a vast amount of intellectual knowledge. And the direction that they started going is, I believe, truly pioneering. And one of the cool things about having a podcast is that I get to reach out to people who are doing cool stuff and get them to share it with me in the guise of sharing it with you. So I was really excited that Kier agreed not only to talk to me today on the show, but to teach us all a little something in the way of a self-care technique. Let me tell you a little bit more. Kieran Schumaker has been helping people with discomfort and pain discover greater agility and ease of movement while cultivating curiosity and an appreciation for our amazing bodies for 23 years. A Board Certified Structural Integrator since 2005, Kier has been developing their unique approach to working more specifically with nerves and arteries over the last 11 years. In addition to working with their clients, Kier has been mentoring and teaching other practitioners until the COVID crisis shut down their practice and kind of put the kibosh on the in-person classes. In response, Kier adapted their neurovascular release techniques to work with clients over Zoom, and soon after began teaching other practitioners how to do the same. So Kier is here today to talk about this unique approach to bodywork and to share with us a strategy for working on the vagus nerve ourselves. Kieran Schumaker, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Oh, thanks, Brody. That was a great introduction and a trip down memory lane. We've both been on such journeys since then.
I know it's been like several lifetimes, it feels sometimes.
Yeah.
And yet there is a common thread through it all. And just watching us follow our own individual curiosity, I think it's really cool to be able to trace it back. I'd love for you to give people a sense of kind of where you started, what it means to be a structural integrator. And then we can get into kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, when I met you, was just getting interested in studying structural integration. And as a shiatsu practitioner, I'd been thumbing my way along meridians, acupuncture meridians. And specifically, we do work along the inner thigh where we're thumbing along the yin meridians. And then I took this fascial anatomy class where we were suddenly no longer, as body workers, thinking about muscles. We were thinking about the spaces between the muscles, the planes of intersection, like between two sections of grapefruit, where, with inactivity, those layers can be more stuck together than they normally are and not differentiated, it can limit movement. People who have tight hamstrings where the hamstrings are glued to the adductors is an example, of something in the inner thigh that's tight. Anyway, so my mind was actually pretty blown when I was suddenly realizing these yin channels that I've been thumbing my way along this whole time are intermuscular septa, like this three-dimensional space where, energy flows. But since then, I've been thinking about them as that's also the pathway for the nerves and the arteries. Quite typically, they run in between the muscles. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. All of those flows, pathways, lines, there are so many metaphors for those those rivers that run through us. But early in my structural integration career, I was thinking more about fascia and fascial connectivity links throughout the body. And a structural integrator looks at postural balance, structural balance. How does the left balance the right? How does the front balance the back? Classic example that you mentioned of the head forward posture. Our heads drift forward when we're peering into Zoom. We want to connect with the person on screen, and our heads come way forward. The further forward your head goes, the more the muscles in the back of your neck that would lift your shoulder blades, the more they have to work, just like the reins on a horse, holding the horse's head, or the cables on a telephone pole, holding the telephone pole from falling over. And so those pains in the neck, in the shoulder, are worsened the further forward your head drifts. So as a structural integrator might approach a shoulder issue by working on opening up the chest, and maybe even working with what crosses the front of the hip, working with the psoas, working with the feet. All of that could be related to your shoulder issue. That's sort of how a structural integrator thinks.
I really appreciate you getting into, like, giving us a sense of how it really is all connected, and taking, like, dividing up the body into muscles is one way of looking at it. And a lot of times when we're studying the body in massage therapy school, yeah, we're learning where muscles originate and where they insert and where nerves run and things like that. And
Yeah.
that's a really useful model for understanding how things work. But we're not these machines, and it
Mm-mm.
doesn't actually make much sense to be thinking about muscles in isolation, because clearly when functional movement as we go through our day involves groups of muscles working together, and what wraps each of those muscle fibers and groups of fibers and organs and all this stuff is this stuff called fascia that only recently sort of was discovered to be an organ, or considered an organ itself, the interstitium, right? That the sort of like
Mm-hmm.
that which stitches us all together, which in Chinese medicine, I think about the sanjiao, right, the triple burner, which is described as this structure, or that it has function without form. And it's
Mm.
basically the relationship between, like, the different it's a communication system for the body. And most of the acupoints that we use, that we tap into, like, some of them are in muscles, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them are in the spaces between things. And so, like, to have, like, a very close alignment with this idea of the fascial planes, or like the things that connect it all. So when we shift our thinking from these sort of mechanical separate bits of muscles that are moving around a robot, but instead thinking about this integrated system where there are pathways of flow and function, and where there needs to be balance in order for everything to work right. So it does make a lot of sense to broaden, if somebody's got a shoulder issue, to look, well, okay, is the shoulder just doing the best it can given the structure of the whole system, like how the person is using their body and what postural positions they find themselves in most often. So it's like it's always made a lot of sense to me to take that kind of structural approach, because it is more big picture, and it is a lot of times like, I mean, certainly with Chinese medicine, where we could be needling things, a lot of these points that we use at a distance from like down channel from where we are, I think could have a lot to do with these pathways, with these
Oh,
fascial chains.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's kind of the world that you were fascinated by and that you dove into.
Yeah.
And then tell us about neurovascular release and kind of like what role that plays and how it's different from just structural integration.
Right. Well, structural integration classically is deep tissue work. It's like got a big firm pressure. And like I mentioned, we're thinking about muscles and myofascia. And I started taking classes that were more very light touch classes from the European osteopathic tradition, where you work very subtly, not as subtle as acupuncture needles, but very gently and with small movements. And it's almost night and day different from the classic structural integration approach. And
Which for some people, sorry to interrupt, that if you've heard of Rolfing, right,
yes,
it's kind of known for being like aggressive and painful, and
yeah,
and certainly that's not the only way of practice. Like that's kind of
no,
one brand within the structural integration umbrella. But this idea that you can actually be working incredibly with an incredible light touch in an incredibly subtle way, comparatively,
yeah.
yeah, is also really interesting. Does it have a similar effect?
Well, surprisingly, it does. And I'll just backtrack
Yeah,
a
yeah,
second and say
please.
that Rolfing, like in its teenagehood, in its youth in the 70s, had that reputation for that really cathartic, intense work. And contemporarily, it spans a wide range of touch. But the super light touch is not so much characteristic of structural integration. And what I found is that that's the work that my own body needed.
Mm-hmm.
The more subtle work, my nervous system needed it. The deep work started to feel too intense. And so I began studying nerves and visceral manipulation, other tissue types. And then I started learning about the artery network. And often this is actually what our body is protecting the most. It cares a lot about blood supply to brain, for example.
That
Like
makes
it,
sense.
yeah,
We
yeah,
kind of need that.
right, right, right. And we've got our nerves that go to our limbs, to our arms. I'm going to keep talking about the neck because that's what we're going to work with today. But they're the peripheral nerves that come out of the neck that go into the arms. And sometimes when we've been doing a lot of heavy labor, or we've been in an auto accident where we get a whiplash, our head is thrown around in such a way that it pulls at those nerve roots in the neck. And then it would be really typical. Let's say the nerves into my right arm got pulled, for me to carry that right shoulder higher to take the strain off of those nerves.
Oh, that makes sense. So you're essentially you're shortening it
Yeah, you
by
shorten up the
by by
pathway.
but yeah, you're shortening it so that there's less strain on it, there's less force and pull, and
Right.
so it's like the body's developed a way to protect itself from feeling
Mm-hmm.
the pain that might have originated from an accident or an injury
Yeah.
or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably just from what you were saying earlier about like it being the kind of work that your body wanted, it's like yeah, it's the kind of work that a lot of bodies respond to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are, that who are really sensitive and or maybe have something like fibromyalgia or like another
Mm-hmm.
chronic systemic condition where where touch doesn't feel good, or where nerves can feel sunburny or sensitive, and that it's really, I think, important to know that there's other ways in for those people who like maybe don't love getting massage, or or who feel like it's really easy for things to feel like too much. So I just really want to emphasize that for folks who might fall into that category.
Yeah, and this is also relevant to practices such as yoga, because often, daily life, like if I were, let's say I had nerves into my right arm that had been yanked and pulled, and my subconscious habit would be to lift that shoulder and maybe shift my head over towards the right shoulder to shorten up the nerve pathway. If I kept trying to make myself have a posture with level shoulders and head back and straight, I would be adding strain to my nervous system, basically. And often daily life puts like extra strain and extra pull on those structures we're trying to protect. And it's often you don't actually get release until you shorten up that pathway significantly, like really put slack into the system before you ask for stretch. And then the stretch that you ask for is actually really small. And it's so small that your body doesn't have a motor response to protect. Your body isn't tightening up the muscles to protect the nerve or blood vessel. And that very tiny stretch is like the kind of stretches that an osteopath would use, somebody who's doing very, very subtle body work. If you learn to do that in your yoga practice to some extent, like let me just say like a seated twist, like you're sitting with your pelvis on the ground and you turn your chest and head to the right, it would be common to try to use your arms to help make that twist happen.
Really yank yourself over. Yeah.
Really, yeah. And that would be overriding your body's protective response, perhaps, for some of those nerves that exit your spine. Whereas if you just turn your body as far as it would go using your abdominal muscles and you don't actually use the arms, and then you pause there and you breathe and you let your ribs get wide. And as they expand, I'm just going to breathe in because I'm doing this in my own body. You can do it with me if you want, but you breathe in and then you exhale. On the exhale, often your body will drift a little further into the turn. And that was because you're doing a tension and release kind of an effect with your ribs, with your breathing. And it allows you to go into the turn further after you've had this tension and release cycle. And the release is the key.
The whole world functions on a tension and release cycle, right? I mean, it's essentially
Yeah.
the pulsation of yin and yang, right?
Right.
And that we do like, and it's a rule in the body, right? Like that there's all sorts of techniques where it's like the rule is after something contracts, it has to relax. That's just the way it goes. It's the refractory period, or that kind of thing, which a lot of us use to reset how the brain understands where we are in space, or how long something can be before we can constrict it, or that anyway. It's a But
Yeah.
yeah, yes to the idea of being able to go into something's opposite
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
qigong principle for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'll just mention the vagus nerve and the blood supply to brain again, because that's what I want to lead you through a little example of this work
Yeah, and
that
tell us.
addresses those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us about the vagus nerve. Like it's kind of having a moment, like a
Yeah. It
lot of
is having a
people.
moment. Yeah.
But I'd love to just like at some point before we delve into the how to do it, the where it goes, what does it do, and who does it talk to?
Right.
Yeah.
So the vagus nerve, it's a cranial nerve. It comes from the base of your brain and it exits your skull along with the jugular vein and goes down the front of the neck and into the core of the body, following around the heart and pericardium. And it ends up going to the esophagus and to the lungs and to the heart and to most of the digestive tract and the kidneys. It really supplies almost all your organs, and it helps regulate your heart rate. So our hearts naturally have a faster heartbeat that's like your get up and go, like launch yourself up out of a chair to answer the doorbell or run from the tiger. It's like its default is to run fast, and the vagus nerve's job is to slow the heart down. And so when it's not working as well, when your vagus nerve is not working as well, you have like tend to have a faster heart rate. The vagus nerve also helps regulate your immune system and your moods. And it's just important overall.
Yeah, it sounds like it's involved in like pretty much all of our rest and repair, rest and digest functions.
Yes, yes, yes. And the way we talk about tone in the vagus nerve, it's different about the way you talk about tone in a muscle. Like sometimes, well, you want good tone in your muscles, that's why we work out often, but really high tone in the muscle, something that's too tight, is often why we're going to get massage.
Things
We
are
want to
hypertonic, right?
hypertonic,
They are
right?
too tight and
Yes,
can't relax. So
right.
we've gone too far on the tension side without as much of the release side. We've been doing
Yeah,
too much weight training and not enough stretching, or or
right.
not enough self massage or whatever.
Right. So high tone when you're talking about muscles might
Uh,
mean it's too much tension. But when you're talking about vagus nerve and you say high tone, that means the vagus nerve is functioning well. So it's doing its job. And often, in order to get it to do its job well, it needs just a little stimulus of stretch. And when it's been too stretched, like in a whiplash accident, the body will shorten up that vagus nerve pathway, and that's the head forward position again. So if you were to sit really tall and imagine a thread lifting your head way up towards the ceiling or towards the sky, you might actually feel some muscle tension alongside your neck, alongside like maybe sternocleidomastoid has to get longer. That's the SCM muscle. Those of you who know muscles, it runs from behind the ears down to the front of your chest, to your collarbones near the breastbone. And that muscle has to get longer when you stretch your head up towards the ceiling. And right behind that muscle is the vagus nerve and the carotid artery, the carotid artery that connects your heart up into your brain. So
I have been using points right around there on almost everyone with
yeah,
chronic neck pain or
yeah,
acute neck pain. But really,
yeah,
it's like that. Just there's a few acupoints in there. There's also points that I've learned in some of the neuromuscular acupuncture classes I've been taking lately, and it is amazing how powerful some points in there are for shifting things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and so if you overstretch your vagus nerve, like with a whiplash, your head drifts forward, and it's like a turtle's neck getting shorter. You're
Yeah.
you're you're shorting that whole pathway of the blood supply and the vagus nerve. And to do a gentle stretch that doesn't reach that threshold at which your body would get alarmed, a gentle stretch actually does that tonifying, that increasing the tone of the vagus nerve in a good way. And it also can stretch the whole artery network into your head. That vagus nerve runs alongside the carotid artery, just like the bike path along the freeway. They're two entirely different things, but they have the same pathway through the
Nice.
neck. So you can't really stretch one without stretching the other. They both get a stretch. Now, I didn't talk very much about arteries yet, but when arteries get injured with overstretch, our body repairs them just like any other tissue with extra collagen fibers, and it makes the tissue a little stiffer, and it makes the artery network a little less stretchy, kind of like when you throw your t-shirt in the dryer and it shrinks a little bit, and then you have to stretch it out in
Yeah.
order to make it fit comfortably again. So I think of the artery network as really just a network, almost like fabric, much more than like a linear line. When we're stretching blood supply into the head, there's carotid artery, but it branches into so many different branches that go to your ears, your eyes, your brain, your jaw muscles, your sinuses, your bones. It's think of an oak tree. And there are two trunks, one in the right side of your neck and one in the left side of your neck. And then it starts branching out, and you've got a branch that goes to all your facial muscles, and then that's the external branch. And then there's internal branch supplies the whole entire brain. And
just to
yeah,
interject here too,
yeah,
I remember a presentation from, I believe this person was a neurologist, some kind of
yeah.
a doctor who was who coins the term, I believe, digital dementia, right? The idea that
Ah,
like kids with these head forward postures were having ADD symptoms and even like Parkinson like tremors and, and memory issues that were corrected just with changing posture. So
wow.
it's like the effects on the brain can be, I think, pretty profound.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my youth, I didn't have the digital posture because we didn't have our digital devices then. But I rode the ski bus and went skiing like 10 weekends out every year. And I would have every other weekend, I'd have a big crash on the mountain that would be a tumbling fall where my hat and my poles would fly everywhere. And in a way, that is a full body whiplash. You really
Mm.
get thrown around. And I had the blood supply into my right leg was really yanked. It led to me pulling my quads later in high school, like injuries where anyway, a lot of it went back to those impact injuries from skiing. And I know that for many years, I'm 56 now, for many years, my whole right quadrant of my upper body and head was like protected. It was like my ear would crawl in towards my midline. My shoulder would crawl in towards my ear, and it almost felt like I had dimmer hearing and dimmer vision on that side. Just it felt congested, small. And over the last year and a half, when I've been teaching this neurovascular work to lengthen the blood supply into the brain, it feels like I've gradually opened up and healed that old restriction that was based on overstretch injury.
A Healthy Curiosity turned 5 years old in July 2021, and I want to express some heartfelt gratitude for you, for listening, for sharing the show, for your ratings and reviews, and for being a fellow giver who cares about your health and personal evolution. This show would not exist without you. To celebrate, I've put out a virtual tip jar. If this show has inspired you, encouraged you, or taught you something over the past 5 years, you're invited to leave me a tip. Head to the show notes and click on the link to the tip jar, or head to brodywelch.com/product/tip jar, all one word. Your gratitude made visible will totally make my day. Now back to the show. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. And this is one of
Yeah,
those things, it's like such a great example of how our bodies are incredibly resilient and they're always wanting health. And sometimes they're adaptive ways that they make it so that we don't have to actually deal with a problem, right? Like they're just gonna like, oh, I'll just do this for you.
yeah,
I'll just pull this shoulder up. I'll just move your head to the side. Like
yeah,
I'll just constrict in this way. It does allow us to get by. And at the same time, if we with an intervention where we go back and we kind of honor those old traumas and we open things up, it's amazing how that functionality and capability can come back. And a lot of times
yeah,
people are used to thinking of health as being this like depressing one-way street towards decline. And it's I think it's just really cool when we find something like that experience you just shared of wow, I can hear better, or that just
yeah,
things seem to be different because you just are going in and tending to what had been a very old traumatized area.
yeah, exactly. I'm wondering, do we have time for me to teach you a little bit about how to do this?
I think we do. Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. Well, one thing that you should know is that, my example of the heart racing, if you feel your own heartbeat going faster, it probably means you're surprising your vagus nerve with too big of a stretch. And it will mean that we want to go with less stretch. So like that example of lifting your head really tall, if we were to stretch the neck really long by sitting very much upright and then do the vagus nerve stretch, it might be enough stimulus on that vagus nerve that the heart would start beating faster, which the solution would be just to sit less tall, try less hard, and follow along with the same breathing that I'm going to guide you through. And that would be more soothing to the vagus nerve.
Awesome. So this is just with the caveat of like, this is not medical advice. This is, if you feel like getting curious and experimenting and playing with us,
Yeah,
then make sure you're not driving a car or in any situation
absolutely.
that is like potentially hazardous.
Yeah,
And yeah, but obviously this is just something to experiment with. And if you're
yeah.
uncomfortable, stop.
Right,
So,
exactly.
and I just have to, like lately, for those who are regular listeners of A Healthy Curiosity, you've been hearing the refrain about doing less than we're humanly capable of. And I love that that gets carried through into this conversation where
Yes.
literally it's like, try less hard, like do a little less than what you're capable of.
Yeah,
And then your nervous system will relax and
yeah,
yeah, it'll be okay.
yeah. And also sit down. Like if you're at
Yeah.
a standing desk or
Uh-huh.
if you're walking around the house, it would be good to find a seat where your sitting bones are in contact with a firm surface and your back can be upright. So you're not like sometimes if you sit on the floor, your lower back slumps. If you can sit in a chair where you can be a little bit more upright, it'll be a more successful stretch. And then the next thing that you need to know is this isn't going to feel like a muscle stretch at all. It'll be much less than what you think of as stretch. And we're going to do this as if it's an experiment, which means that we're going to test out beforehand what tilting your head feels like side to side and what rotating your neck feels like turning left and right. And then we're going to test afterwards. And that way you'll see what the effect is of the stretch.
Sounds good.
Okay. And then the next thing is I want to give you a physical experience of how much stretch we're looking for. So if you take a fold of your shirt in your two hands, so you're pinching between your index finger and your thumb, pinch a little fold of fabric, and then use your other hand, and you're going to have like maybe 2 inches between your two hands, and the other hand pinches fabric too. And your right hand, if it pulls the fabric just enough so that the left hand feels it, that's like a small amount of tension. And now go ahead and bring your hands closer to one another so you've got slack. So you've got less tension, like you eliminate the tension. And this time, when your right hand pulls, go just far enough so that the left hand begins to feel it. It's probably less stretch than you did initially. That's the kind of stretch we're looking for, the kind of stretch sensation. It's going to be very tiny. So find your seat, and you can just put your hand, actually, we're going to do a pre-test first. So you find your seat, you're not efforting to get too tall, you're just upright, and just let your right ear drop towards your left shoulder, maintaining some length in your neck. And then come back upright and tip over the other way. Let your left ear drop. And as you let your left ear drop, notice if you feel any kind of a gentle pull in the right side of your neck. Then come back up. We're going to test the first side again. So tip over, and we're comparing left and right, and notice which side doesn't lengthen quite as easily.
This is just an ear to shoulder kind of a
Yeah,
direction. It's a side bend for the neck.
It's a side bend for the neck.
Okay.
Yeah, you're just tipping over
Okay.
to one side and then to the other. And for me, it's my habitually tighter side. My right side is the one that has a little more resistance.
Okay.
And so
the yoga practitioner in me is curious, should we be trying to anchor our shoulders down as we do this?
No, just
Okay.
let them rest.
All right. Got it.
We're going for baby stretch, tiny stretch. And it
tiny
just
stretch. Okay.
Yeah, little just sensation, almost just this podcast is about curiosity. So just be curious about what is that sensation. It might not even feel like a muscle pull. It might feel like, I don't know, some other I'm going to suggest maybe an artery. There might be some other sensation besides muscle that's under tension. So it's just a teeny little, some kind of little bit of a sensation on one side of your neck. Decide which side has more of that. And that's the side we're going to lengthen first. Okay. So that was our pre-test. Let's put your palm of your hand on your sternum, on your breastbone, and put the other hand on top of it and just gently anchor into the sternum. And you can let gravity take your hands down a little bit towards the floor. And as you do that, some of you will actually feel a pull in the front of your neck already. I don't know, Brody, do you feel a pull in the front of your neck when you're doing that?
A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, and my little bit of pull is near my trachea, a little bit more on the left. So it's different from the pull I felt when I was tilting. Okay, so let your hands lift away from the floor a little bit so they're not pulling down on your sternum. And then hug your breastbone and just anchor. This is stabilizing the heart behind the sternum. The pericardium is this fibrous wrap, like a tent around the heart, and it's attached to the sternum. And as we're holding the sternum, you're anchoring your heart. Okay, so next we want to, on the side that wasn't lengthening as well, we're going to tie an imaginary balloon onto the top of your ear and start floating that ear towards the ceiling. So let the balloon lift a little bit, and it's only going to lift just far enough until you feel a tiny sensation in the side of your neck, the first little bit of sensation, and then pause there and breathe in. Take a nice full breath where your ribs go wide. And then a long exhale, let all your air out. And as your air goes out, your sternum drops away from your head. It actually becomes an artery stretch as all your air is going out. You might feel more sensation in your neck. And then take your arms down, let them rest in your lap. And we're just going to do the post-test of tilting your head to one side and then the other. And see if that side you stretch now lengthens more. What about you, Brody?
Yeah, I get a sense, my right side was the side that was a little bit more restricted, and I definitely feel like it wants to go a little further, and it's now getting my attention in a different spot.
Yeah. So we're just going to be systematic, and we're going to alternate, and we're going to do the other side now. So hug your sternum.
When you say that, do you mean like just pressure with the palm of the hand towards the heart? So basically just kind of like hands on our chest, pressure going inward to stabilize the heart there.
Yep. And I use the word hug because it's sort of a gentle word.
It's a great word, but we're not like wrapping our arms around ourselves.
No. That's good clarification. Yeah, you're just pressing the breastbone.
We're securing the heart with a little comforting touch here.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is just a reference point. When we tie a balloon to the other ear, go ahead and tie that imaginary balloon on and let it lift a tiny amount. And it's just enough, like you almost out of the corner of your eye, you can look up at that imaginary balloon. And it's not really a full side bend of the neck. You're just lifting a little bit and then breathe. Let your ribs go wide and exhale all the way, which means your heart drops away from your head. And then take your hands down and let's do a little side bend test again. And it probably lengthens a little bit more on the side number 2.
Oh, I love this.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. And it's so yoga, qigong, like that anybody who's cultivated their introspective capacity or, interoceptive capacity, it's like, this is really mind-blowingly cool.
Right. Okay, so
Good.
there's two more variations. That was variation 1, and it's the
Cool.
gentlest.
Mm-hmm.
Variation 2 involves a little bit of turning. So we need a pre-test that involves turning. So turn, and your chest isn't going to turn, just your head, and look towards your right, look over your right shoulder, and then look towards the left. And just notice which side has more resistance. Like for me, it's when I turn left, there's more resistance. What about you, Brody? Which way?
Right.
Okay. So whichever way offers more resistance, that's the direction we're going to turn, but start out facing forward. And we're going to do the same thing with the hands. So they're going to touch your palms on your chest, and you're going to hug the sternum. And then turn part way, like only halfway towards the side that had more resistance, and pause. So this is pre-lengthening the vagus nerve and the carotid artery on the side that you're turning to. It's pre-lengthened just a little bit. And now we're going to add the balloon on the opposite ear. So you lift the opposite ear a little bit towards the ceiling, and somewhere in your neck, there might be a little bit of a sensation of tiny bit of stretch or pull. And pause there and breathe. Let your ribs go wide. Exhale all the way. Your heart drops away from your head. And then take your hands down. And now let's just see if head turning changed. So turn and look left and right. And one of those directions may be a little easier. It also might not have changed, but let's try the head tilting, the side bending that we did initially, and just check side bending. And that improved side bending on my tight side. That's what I noticed.
Me too. And rotation.
Yeah, good, cool. Okay, we're going to turn the other way. So hug the sternum, heart, hands on the heart. And we're going to turn the opposite direction when you haven't turned, just part way, halfway. And then put the balloon on the opposite ear and lift a little bit and pause and breathe. Let your ribs get wide. And exhale all the way. And then come back to center and take your hands down. And check, let's check turning. And then we'll check tilting, side bending. Just notice what changed. Incrementally, so now my opposite side feels like it does side bending better.
Is this the kind of thing that we can expect that we have to do frequently? Or is it like, does
Well,
it tend to stick?
both things are true.
Mm-hmm.
You'll you tend to get cumulative improvement, with repetition, and I'll explain about that in a minute. And it's sort of temporarily you have freedom, but you did stretch something in a permanent way. It's just like we haven't stretched everything. So your muscles may protect again a little bit tomorrow. And then tomorrow, when you do this stretch, you'll get like maybe a little different branch of the artery network into the head, or a little something else. Like we're stretching just the one little branch that's tightest. And then the next time we repeat, we do a next little branch. And so gradually you get more and more of that shrunken sweater has openness and freedom.
Just from that work that we've done, I feel like a little more alert. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
a little bit more present, like colors are maybe a little brighter, like just that I
Yes.
don't know if that's actually what's happening, but I feel like more the sensory awareness in my head feels enhanced compared to what it was.
That's a great observation. So the next the third thing that I'm going to do with you
Yeah.
is it's going to be a combination of rotation and side bending again, but this will be a bigger stretch for the blood supply to the muscles at the back of your base of your skull, the occipital muscles. So up, up, up. If you close your eyes actually and And just notice what sort of tension you have up at the base of your head, up at the top of your neck. So for some of you, it'll feel like your head is tilted back a little bit, like your chin wants to lift. And the stretch that we're going to do now is going to be for the blood supply, specifically for the blood supply to those muscles back there. It'll also get blood supply to your jaw muscles and your eyes and your brain, but it'll be a bigger stretch for those muscles, the blood supply to those muscles. I think you'll notice a difference posturally. So go ahead and stabilize your sternum again, your heart. Put your hands on your heart in the same way. And let's not worry about which side you're going to do first. Let's just, I'm going to say, let's all turn to the right and go part way. And then this time we're going to add the balloon to the right ear. So the balloon goes on the same side, and you won't have to lift very far to feel a pull in your neck, a gentle pull. So add the balloon, and it's just the balloon is on the same side you're turning to, and breathe in, let your ribs go wide. Exhale all the way. And then let your hands come down. And close your eyes and just notice the back of your head. It might feel like your neck is flatter on the side that you were just stretching.
I feel lopsided.
I know, it's totally lopsided. Right, so we got to do the other side.
We have to fix it, yes.
Okay, so hands on the heart again. And you're going to turn part way to the other side. And then add the balloon to that same side. And again, you might not need very much balloon you're just going to the first sensation of pull in your neck, tiny pull, and add breath. Ribs go wide. Exhale all the way. Heart drops away from the head. And then take your hands down and close your eyes and just notice how your head is sitting on your neck. Is that different?
Oh yeah. I love this.
Yeah. Okay. So that's part of coming out of that head forward position, of peering forward into the Zoom screen. Okay. So, but let's check right rotation and see if that's changed. Right. And left rotation. And then let's check side bending. Is that overall a little bit freer, Brody?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so now just notice, I didn't really ask you to notice your stress level at the beginning, but just take a moment to sit and notice the state of your nervous system. Yeah, and then this is that last integrative piece, which I'll explain in a second, but just let your chin drop and let your forehead fall forward a little bit. And feel your vertebra opening up in the back of your neck. You might feel a little tension in the muscles, which is normal. Just roll down a little bit until you feel a pull somewhere between your shoulder blades, and then you can reverse and stack your vertebra up one at a time on top of one another. And then go ahead and turn and look to your left. And then look to your right. And then come back to center. And this is the final integrative piece. We're just going to use our whole body. Sit on the edge of your chair. Feel your feet on the floor and your full footprint on the floor. And now press your right foot into the floor. Deepen your footprint as that begins to turn your whole body to the left. Go ahead and turn and look. Let your chest turn. Let your whole body turn left. Breathing in and then exhale and come back to the center. And then deepen your left footprint. Press it into the floor and turn your chest and your head to the right and look to see what's over on that side of the room. Breathing, just letting your breath come in and out, and then come back to center. And notice how your nervous system feels. I feel a little more settled.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that was great. That was great. Thank you so much for such a a beautiful description of this practice that we could all that we could all benefit from. And I'm sure that I'll be returning to this recording
Yeah.
to try it again. So if people either want to work with you individually as a
Yeah.
patient or a client, or if they want to take one of your classes, if they're a practitioner who wants to help somebody else with
Yeah.
this information, what's the best way to get in touch with you? And I'll make sure to put it in the show notes, but give
Yeah.
us a sense.
Well, people can email me at learn.nvr@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to give them information about classes. I'm teaching a 12-week class, September through December, for manual therapists and movement therapists who want to do this kind of work with their clients. And
So it
I
would be
also
like
have,
massage therapists, yoga teachers, people like that.
yeah,
Okay.
Pilates teachers, even sports trainers, anybody who wants to do more interoceptive cultivation with their clients. And it addresses the whole body.
And that
But
starts September.
don't have the date yet, but
Okay, but
sometime in
September.
September.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Great.
Yeah,
Wonderful. I'll make sure that that gets linked in the show notes wherever you
great.
are getting this podcast. Kieran Schumaker, thank you for being such a wealth of knowledge and sharing it so generously with us today.
Oh, thank you, Brody, for having me here. It's always fun to talk with and play a little bit with you. It's
Yay.
great. Okay.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.